Welcome back to the channel. If you are planning a trip to Washington, D.C., then visiting the Holocaust Museum is an absolute must. It was dedicated back in 1993, and it is the U.S. official memorial to the Holocaust. This is a popular museum. More than 40 million people have visited this museum since it opened back in 1993, and 35% of them are visitors from outside the United States. This is an intense museum with graphic images. It's going to stir up a lot of emotions. There's a lot to unpack here, so let's get started right away. Right now, we are outside the museum and we're walking directly towards it. It's sandwiched between the red brick building you see ahead of you, which is one of the original Smithsonian buildings, and the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. If you want to make the most of your time, I recommend you go down to the Bureau of Engraving and Printing and get a time pass so that when you're done with this museum, you can go there and have a more comprehensive day. As you first enter the museum, you'll see people who are waiting, and that's because it's not a first come first basis. It's timed entry, and I'll explain the significance of that as we get further on into the museum. But you have to check in. They check who you are to make sure that you can actually gain access to the museum. And the reason why they do the time entry is to make sure that the entrance point isn't overwhelmed with guests. It's a very popular museum, and so if you come on the weekdays, you're still going to find a timed entry type system. However, I will say this, you can go on their website on a first come first served basis, and with the donation of $1, you can get same day entry. Also, if you just show up to the museum, they will do everything they can to try to get you inside the museum. And the reason why is because they want everyone exposed to what the Holocaust is about and to have it be a learning experience for everyone. They don't want to tell anyone you can't come to this museum. Now, when you first enter, it's a little strange. You'll go into an elevator and it will take you to a different floor, and you work your way from the top down. This is part of the reason why also it's a timed entry. If you have small children who are younger than 11 years old, they do not necessarily recommend you bring them to this museum. It is graphic. They do not hold back on what the Holocaust was really about. As soon as you enter the museum, you're going to see some disturbing graphics. And as they walk you through the museum, they'll help you understand how the Holocaust began and how it ended with the final solution. As you walk through this museum, it's sort of a surreal experience. It's different than many other museums that you'll visit where you have a sense of anticipation, or you're excited, or you're happy. There's not a lot of people who are smiling. No kids are running around having a good time. People aren't laughing. They're just taking all the information in because it's extremely sobering. It's unimaginable, the inhumanity that men did to other men, people who they didn't even know and had no reason to hurt. But the Holocaust is real. When I first came to this museum many years ago, I kind of wondered, why are we doing this? And the mantra was never again. And surprisingly today, fast forward several decades later, and you have people who are actually denying the truth of the Holocaust. This museum is necessary. People who are out there who are saying that the Holocaust never happened. Believe it or not, they're saying the Holocaust never happened. I mentioned earlier that about a third of the people who come here are from other countries. They do the best job they can to try to make it accessible to everyone. And everyone kind of gets the gist looking at the images and the pictures as to what's happening. However, it is strongly geared towards people who speak the English language. Also, if you're German, you can understand the written portions of it. But if you speak English, navigating this museum and understanding what's happening is not going to be a challenge. I will say though, it's heavy on text, so you have to read constantly while you're in the museum in order to appreciate what's happening. There's also lots of visual images to help see the rise of Germany and the rise of Hitler. Something I liked about this museum was that it did not attack the German people or German people of German heritage. It talked about the Holocaust and the impact it had on the Jewish people. However, it wasn't an assault against Germany or the German people, which I thought was tactfully done. One of the things that's heart-wrenching and sad about this image of these individuals in this room is that all of them were killed for no other reason than their Jewish heritage. If your stay in Washington is limited and you're trying to plan how long you should give this museum, they recommend anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. However, some people come here and spend all day. They don't feel it's enough. I feel that if you spend, say, 2 hours in this museum, you're sort of rushing through the museum and not really getting the degree of saturation that is needed in order to appreciate the Holocaust. This museum is very heavy on the feet. Although it is wheelchair accessible, for the most part, you didn't see a lot of people with wheelchair that were in the museum. Also, it tended to be, in my opinion, at times very crowded, especially during some of the exhibits. I feel that maybe, say, if you have a disability, it's going to be pretty hard to navigate this museum. This museum employs a pretty large staff in order to keep the memory of the Holocaust alive. They employ as many as 400 staff and volunteers. As you walk throughout the museum, one of the challenges, or I would say things that were disappointing when it comes to the museum, was that there wasn't a lot of people there to help you appreciate or talk you through what you're actually seeing. So there's going to be not a lot of staff there to say, this is what this is what this meant, or what have you. It really is very heavy on you being able to read the documents that are there that are explaining what you're looking at. Now, this video goes through the entire museum, and there are certain things that you're going to see and other things that just because of my channel and having to make it available and palatable to a wide audience, I'm not showing. Now, if you bring kids there are really significant atrocities and images that are overly graphic. And one of the things that they do to prevent young kids from being able to be exposed to that is by having things where adults who are taller have to look down at a, say, video screen in order to see some of the images like what you're looking at right here. So if you have young kids, they're not necessarily going to be exposed to it, even if they're, say, like 11 years old and they're able to maybe appreciate much of what is happening. The real vile conduct is not necessarily going to be exposed to them. Many museums are turning to technology in order to tell the story, and this is not necessarily one of them. There are aspects of the museum that allows you to use, pads and technologies to understand the images and the people who are the story of the Holocaust. But it is not, and when it's done exceptionally. However, there's not a ton of this. There are some sections, but again, for the most part, you're going to be hearing audio on video screens and reading narratives that are, on the walls. I mentioned earlier that this museum is heavy on the feet. There are periodic locations throughout the museums where you can actually sit down and get off your feet. However, they're few and far between. For the most part, you're going to be on your feet for the majority of your time in this museum. This museum divides the Holocaust into 3 distinct chapters. The first is what's called the Nazi assault. That's followed by what's called the final solution, and the third and final chapter is called the last chapter. The museum presents a chronological history of the Holocaust through artifacts, photographs, film, and eyewitness testimony. If you go on the regular tour, there's only one theater that you're going to be able to use, and this is it right here. And it's individuals who are telling their story about their experience in the Holocaust, how it impacted them, their loved ones, their families, and the world around them. The museum is constantly updating and changing exhibits, so the best way to keep informed as to what is there and what is not is to check out their website. This is something that's exceptional. You oftentimes think of the Holocaust as something that has happened in history. However, there are survivors who are alive today, and they can tell their own personal encounter. And this is a person sharing their own story of surviving the Holocaust. What we're looking at right now is the Hall of Remembrance, where it inspires people to, not only appreciate the Holocaust, but also to never forget. When it comes to the size of this museum, I wouldn't describe it as being large. However, it is by no means small. It's more like a mid-sized museum. It has over 13,000 artifacts, and it does an exceptional job, not only in telling the story of the Holocaust, but also displaying the artifacts and changing exhibits over time so that the Holocaust can be fresh in people's mind. One of the lessons that the museum strives to teach all its visitors is never again. However, the unfortunate reality is, even with the lessons that we have learned of the Holocaust, there are other atrocities that are happening and have happened since the Holocaust all throughout the world. One of the things I liked about this museum is that it didn't stop with the Holocaust. It looked on the world globe footprint and realized that there are other things that are happening that we need to bring attention to. What you're looking at right now is called Daniel's Story. And if you show up to the museum and you cannot get in the permanent exhibit because either they're too full or for any other reason, this section is open to anyone who comes. And it's probably one of the best done renditions of the ghettos I've ever seen in Germany. And it's an excellent walkthrough to show you really what the German people experienced in Germany while they were segregated from the rest of the population, used for slave labor, and treated in a horrific way. I can't reiterate it enough how important this museum is, especially since democratic principles are not only under assault here within the United States, but also across the world. And it's important that this museum serves as a reminder to what the Holocaust is, how it started, and how it ended. Again, if you're visiting Washington, D.C., this museum is a must.